Good evening and welcome to tonight's panel discussion, The Nuclear Deal and the Future of U.S.-Iran Relations. My name is Brad Herling and I'm the chair of the Division of Humanities and Social Sciences here at Marymount Manhattan College. The division is pleased to sponsor this panel along with the Department of International Studies here at MMC and the American Iranian Council. It's great to see so many of our students here this evening. This kind of programming reinforces the kind of global citizenship, critical, active, and engaged that the division, and I would say the college as a whole, wishes to promote. At the same time, we welcome those of you from outside the Marymount community, particularly affiliates of the AIC, who have joined us on campus tonight.
I wanted to say a few words about AIC very quickly. The American Iranian Council is now celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. We established ourselves 25 years ago. That was a time that even talking about U.S.-Iran was a taboo. I believe not even 5% of Iranians or Americans thought we have any mind getting in that field. It was such a strange idea to come out and say U.S. and Iran have to work together because they have more in common than in difference. And we believed in that philosophy. Our mission then became to get this two nations together once again and for good of both peoples.
Negotiators representing the P5+1 and Iran made history in July as they announced a comprehensive deal to peacefully resolve the protracted nuclear issue. While these negotiations intentionally focused exclusively on the nuclear aspect, they could open more potential for the US and Iran to work more closely together on matters such as regional security, stability in Iraq and Afghanistan, the elimination of Daesh and other extremist groups, stemming the flow of drug trafficking, and ensuring free flow of oil, all areas in which both the United States and Iran have common interests and opportunities for cooperation. Moreover, the deal announced in Vienna calls for the removal of all of the nuclear-related sanctions that were imposed by the United Nations, the European Union, and the United States. In dutiful implemented, the removal of sanctions could be a major change for the Iranian economy. I'm now going to hand the podium over to Mr. Keyvan Afshari, our fantastic and very well-informed Director of Communications, who will serve as the moderator for tonight's discussion.
Okay, so my name is Keyvan Afshari. I'll be your moderator this evening. Ambassador Luers will be joining us shortly, but we will go ahead and get started, and he'll slip in as soon as he gets here. So I'd like to start with Professor DeGennaro and ask you, what is the significance of this Iran nuclear deal in terms of its effects for American national security?
That's a broad question, but I think the overall beginning of engagement with Iran is absolutely necessary for the future of U.S. international security. I wish that we had a better temperament in Washington right now in order to support this deal from the political perspective and have been able to put parameters in place where we could also take advantage of this deal. And I think in those cases, the proponents or opponents have valid statements to make. The agreement is certainly an open door. It's a basic opening. It's definitely Iran and the US have so much in common. They should have been talking a long time ago. Engagement is always the way to go first. And we've unfortunately put our military way too ahead of our diplomacy and engagement. Iran has basically survived all of these sanctions and has made its way through with more diplomacy than probably any nation has in a long time. So I think if we can build on what we've done, build on the relationship and go forward, it can only benefit us in the long run. But as the last point I'll just say is, I usually I just came back from the Middle East. So I spent all of August in Lebanon and Jordan. And before I left, I told my colleagues that the train had left the station and the Americans better catch up. Now I'm telling them the train has left the station, you missed it. And you better get moving, because honestly, the whole world is just waiting for that open door. Beirut is one of the most, biggest financial centers in the world, and the banks are ready, and they're planning, and they're at the starting gate, and as soon as these doors open and these sanctions lift, we are going to be behind the race. So, in that context, I think we need to keep that in mind and get things moving.
From a legal perspective, can American entities engage with their Iranian counterparts at this point, or is that still prohibited?
That's a great question, and I wanted to thank AIC and Marymount University for having this important event. It's great to see everyone out here and interested and engaged on this issue. And really, I think I need to respond to that question in sort of 4 basic points that I hope everyone will take away tonight, just from a legal perspective. And the first is that this is a very unique deal. Nothing that I've seen, and most of the practitioners in my area have not seen, where you have a multilateral agreement, not just the United States played the central role, frankly, but between world powers and Iran, where there are obligations to, on the Iranian side, to reduce its nuclear program through verifiable steps, and in return, the United States will remove certain secondary sanctions. And as part of this agreement, there's actually a dispute resolution process. Again, something that we have not really, there are in other contexts, like with trade agreements, but this is the first time where the reduction of sanctions can be tied to specific commitments. And if one participant believes that another side is not living up to its obligations, can go through this dispute resolution process through a fairly compressed time frame with a joint commission and then the foreign ministries of all the participants to resolve issues. But if those issues are not resolved, then that can lead to one party saying, basically, we're walking away from the deal. And that's something that we have not really seen before, and I think and I'll circle back to this, I think is one of the reasons why this agreement requires some special attention and care by both sides. Any kind of relief is not effective yet. It will not be effective until sanctions are lifted. So there's been discussion about what sanctions will be lifted. Some of those have been outlined. Others remain somewhat shrouded in mystery at this point, unfortunately. And as we both said, we can't predict the future, but I would not expect that there will be any lifting until sometime next year. So we'll be in 2016 at some point before any sanctions are lifted.
There's going to be a downtime now of wondering how the United States and Iran are going to react to this new situation. But you have to begin by saying this is, we say unprecedented, but an amazing diplomatic conclusion to a long 35-year struggle. So anything one has to say about the negative issues that are going to surface, you have to realize this is unprecedented, and you have to give credit to both governments and all the other 5 others that played such a major role in making sure that we all stood together toward the end. Having said that, I guess I'll say a couple things about the problems. I teach a course at Columbia on talking with the enemy, and I deal with a lot of relationships that we've had, and have looked at how, after the first surge of opening relations, particularly with the Soviet Union in 1933 and with China in 1971, but also with Cuba and others, and I've dealt with most of them, there's a beginning that makes everybody think, now we've done it, now we can open up the doors to better relationships. and then they discover that isn't what's going to happen. In the case of China, it took 7 years to open diplomatic relations with China. And the first several years were very complicated and painful, and they went through a real decline. Now, I realize Iran isn't China, and this is a different world, a different situation, but virtually every relationship has had its opening and then reaction. And I think it's already happening in the case of the United States and Iran. The President's speech today, the mention by Secretary Carter, Secretary of Defense Carter, that the good thing about this is it opened up new targets for the United States against Iran, which didn't go down well with the Iranians. The language coming out of Washington has been not appreciated, and it's been, I think, soured the hopes that particularly at this meeting, this General Assembly, there would be a better tone. I guess you just have to accept the fact this is going to be the fact. There's several reasons for that. First, this agreement was so profound in its effect on particularly Iran, its belief that it was getting out of the closet, it was becoming treated as a partner, would be respected by the world, and they didn't have to give up a lot to be in a new footing with the international community. But the downside of that is that they have their own narrative. What just happened? What does this agreement mean for the United States, for Iran? Did we win or lose? Did we get everything we wanted? Their narrative has to be, yes, we got most of what we wanted. We gave up very little. And we did a good job, and we won. And that's important domestically for them, and because I think they really believe that this was a successful negotiation, because it did give them the opportunity for Rouhani to satisfy those who elected him 3 years ago, that we're going to get sanctions relief and we're going to get a relationship with the world. And it also enabled him and the Supreme Leader to acknowledge that over all these years, sanctions had been illegal. They hadn't been fair, because the UN Security Council eliminated them. So their narrative is understandable, but the more they say it, the more the opposition in Washington feels offended and convinced that Obama sold out the store. The language coming out of the White House and out of the Department of Defense and others is not pleasing to the ears of the Iranians. So how does that play out? What happens? Well, their tensions build. Well, this is what they really think. They're humiliating us. They continue to humiliate us. They continue to want to humiliate us. And the Americans say, well, here they go. They're free. Nothing can stop them from being the most powerful country in the Middle East. I think over the near term, the environment will not be helpful. But I do believe that there has to be the beginning of institutionalization of the contact. The Treasury Department, the Defense Department, the Agricultural Department, the Commerce Department have to begin to talk to their counterparts, because it no longer can be done between Kerry and Zarif. It has to be done at a different level, at all levels of government, because this is going to be a long-term effort to get both countries to get out of the habit of hating their enemy and get into the habit of finding practical ways in which we can work with each other.
The success or failure of this is going to be on our own shoulders. It's going to be on what we decide to put into it and how we decide to work on implementation. And when you asked me at the beginning, the national security of the U.S., how does this affect it? In the beginning, I really thought, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, this opens so many doors. We're going to be able to have dialogue. We'll be able to talk about different things in the Middle East. We'll be able to share, different intelligence. And And as the days progressed, and what I had seen in the Middle East, having just been there, a lot of this is really going to be up to our political will to be able to make sure that our government is capable of implementing this agreement. If we have a very fractured system in Washington, we have a State Department that's very marginalized, and a foreign policy that's very centered in the White House, often with a lot of inexperience. Not that they're not bright individuals, but they're not necessarily experienced in these areas. They don't understand whole of governance, and they don't understand the pieces of how to get their own government to engage, let alone get their own government to engage with a government that they haven't spoken to in 30 years and they're concerned about. So I think in the long term, it's really about us getting our house in order, and the political climate in Washington, to me right now, is extremely worrisome. So.
And what about, will this deal last beyond an Obama presidency, you think? Because it's become a partisan issue with Republicans lining up against it.
Well, legally.
Well, yeah, I mean, the actual agreement lasts at least eight to 10 years. There are some aspects of the deal that last longer than that, up to like 15 or 20 years when we get to things like mining uranium. But this really goes back to what I said earlier, in that there's this dispute resolution mechanism, and that process can be undertaken very quickly. And under the deal, the United States does have the right to reimpose the secondary sanctions or other sanctions that have been lifted if it feels like Iran is not living up to its commitments. Possibly the Iranian government could do the same thing if it feels like it's been significantly harmed because sanctions have not been lifted as committed to under the agreement. And so I think that's the real risk here, is that depending on what happens with the government, there could be a differing view of the obligations with a new administration, and who knows what can happen there. The President of the United States has significant executive authority, and obviously, as we've seen recently, Congress has become more active in the field to restrict trade, and it's unclear whether they'll be aligned on this issue. So it's difficult to predict what would happen, but the mechanisms are there to sort of freeze relations again, if things come to that. Hopefully they won't. But.
I don't see how a president, even a Donald Trump, as president, can say, okay, we've negotiated this deal with 5 other countries. The whole world has bought into it. We've begun to make it implemented. And say, hey, we're going to scrub it. Now, I think it would be difficult from the standpoint of international law. It would damage seriously our relations with the rest of of our allies, never mind China and Russia. And it would place us in a situation of being a renegade in the world. I mean, we would have said, we've reached this deal, we've begun to implement it, now we don't like it anymore, so we're going to pull out of it. I just don't see even a know-nothing president agreeing to do that or being able to pull it off. I mean, he may say a lot, he may try to damage it, he may delay implementation, but we have a deal now. We have an agreement with 7 other countries, and we have to sort of figure out how we're going to abide by it.
We ourselves, or the U.S. government right now, is our own worst enemy. And just by the explanation of how the agreement is written, I don't think France is going to say none of its citizens can engage in Iranian trade. They would prefer that they do. So we're missing out on international economic issues which actually can build on or increase our international security position in the world. So because the U.S. has been so economically strong, this has given us a lot of the leverage to be able to work with other countries and other places. We have turned into a military strong and forgotten how to talk to people in other places. This agreement quickly got away from us because of our own internal partisanship and bickering and a very strong lobbying group on Capitol Hill that unfortunately has Congress's ear at every turn. In the bigger global picture, this is a great movement forward for the country in the political realities of what's happening in Washington. It's extremely worrisome, again, because I don't think anybody has the political will or knowledge. You know, President Trump, President Fiorina, I could go on about how to really engage on a political level with these countries and therefore enhance and increase the U.S. international security. Because right now, we're at a very delicate position. Every time you travel abroad in this region right now, people don't even want to know what America thinks anymore. They don't care. They want to figure out how they're going to work for itself. And like I said, this agreement got away from us, and we're seeing it because the Iranians, the Russians, are going ahead and making regional deals already that we're not allowed to talk to these people because they're terrorists or they're, Hezbollah runs half of Lebanon. They're in the parliament. We still won't talk to them because we call them names. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. These problems exist in our own internal political structure. And unless we get some good people able to implement this and work with this, we're gonna find ourselves in a very critical position.
When the elections are over, and this doesn't become a purely Democratic Republican problem, and assuming that Trump isn't elected president, I think you have an opportunity to have the recognition in this country that this was an excellent agreement. That it provided most of our objectives. It took a terrible problem off the table, and it opened the door to new possibilities. Right. Secondly, implementing the agreement. Once you begin implementing it, which will begin, as somebody said, in a few months, and it begins to be in place. Mm-hmm. And there are creative ways in which the implementation can work out, in which we can work closely with our allies, other members of P5+1, and to find ways in which we can implement it, but also successfully add components to it. I mean, my pet is that at some point, I think that other countries can participate in the nuclear program with Iran, particularly in the petrochemical industry and other areas. They can work with gas and oil. They can work with peaceful energy, use of peaceful nuclear energy. And that will be the best possible inspections we can have, is to be partners with them. And we propose that, and I think it's still a possibility. If we get to the point where we actually can work with them on a place like Iran and find that our relationships, our approach to Iran is identical, to Afghanistan is identical to Iran's, and work on that track, there's a lot that can be done that will turn this relationship around.